So welcome everyone to the Family Office and Angels panel at Digital RESI September. We're at the third day of the conference. We have very seasoned, experienced investors here coming from family office and angel investor type backgrounds. I would like to especially thank Rob for moderating today's session, and I will let Rob take it from here.
Welcome everybody. Glad you could join us today for the panel. If you have questions, you can hit the Q&A and type your questions out down at the bottom. We're going to start out with introductions, brief introductions of ourselves and our groups. I will start. I'm the chairman of the Cherry Stone Angel Group, which is based in Providence, Rhode Island. We have about 60 members. We've been in existence for about 16 or 17 years. We have currently 18 or 19 companies in portfolio. We've had a number of exits. We've had a number that have gone toes up over the years, but it's a very interactive group, has a strong social function, and we are pretty eclectic in what we look at. We do have about 50% of our portfolio in life sciences or health sciences generally, but we also look at hard tech, we look at soft tech, we look at a number of things. We have a very active deal pipeline and diligencing process that we use. So that's mine. Ron, why don't you go on next?
Okay. I'm Ron Palivoda with the Palivoda.
Sounds like we had a freeze. Ron, we're having bandwidth issues with you. Laura, why don't we hop over to you? And we'll see if Ron comes back on.
Early stage life sciences. And
okay, wait, hang on.
We're good?
Yeah, you went dead on us for a second there.
All right.
Try it again.
So we've been around for 25 years, and so a lot of experience in various sectors. In the early stage investing in life sciences, we have a dedicated fund that focuses on technology that reduces healthcare costs, especially in the United States. And we prefer to look at data-rich applications that require a lot of analytics. So AI engines in bioinformatics, digital health, genomics, precision medicine, stuff like that. We have really a good interest in adding more than just capital to our project. So for example, we have dedicated internal resources for data analytics in our data lab. So we would prefer to see a project where we help them not only in terms of capital, but also in terms of growing and nurturing their business using our internal resources to complement their expertise. And we typically take a very long-term perspective on investing in teams. We don't like transactional. We like to really learn what the talent is and nurture that talent through multiple years. Because we understand that sometimes the project doesn't work, and we want to keep that talent close to us in our orbit, and perhaps move it to a different project, or maybe we start a new project using that existing talent.
Good. Laura, how about you?
Hi, I'm Laura Davis. As far as I'm concerned, I'm an academic scientist by training and in a previous life. And for the past 6 years, I've been an angel investor with Golden Seeds, where I now lead the Boston chapter and co-lead the national healthcare sector. So Golden Seeds was founded in 2005 with the express purpose of increasing access to capital for women entrepreneurs. So we require that a woman is in the C-suite with in a position of power and decision-making and has substantial equity in the company. We are a national group. We have over 300 members. Our main offices are in New York, Boston, and Silicon Valley, but we have satellite offices across the country. We've invested over 135 million so far in about 193 companies, and those companies have gone on to raise about $1.2 billion in outside capital. We're sector agnostic, but within healthcare and life sciences, we normally invest in devices, diagnostics, and digital health, and also broad platform technologies to aid biotechnology and drug discovery, but one-off therapeutics we generally don't invest in. We come in at seed to small Series A, and usually with it between 200,000 and 2 million, but we syndicate larger deals. And obviously in healthcare, it tends to be on the higher end of that. So, and we also do a lot of mentoring for women entrepreneurs. We really like to meet entrepreneurs very early in their career and really help them through and support them through their lifetime.
Good, thank you. Miriam, you want to jump in?
Sure, hi. So we are sponsors of Keiretsu Forum, which is the largest angel investment group in the world and consists of a network of regions and chapters around the world. We're sponsors for the group out of Philadelphia that covers the East Coast of the US. We're also sponsors of Mid-Atlantic BioAngels, and we're business psychologists by background that advise the entrepreneurs, advise the angel groups that we're sponsors of, and strategics and a number of other VCs and angel groups on talent, on vetting talent, on looking at the leadership skills of talent, and looking at how they've constituted their teams to drive adoption, because very often, the scientific hurdles are and regulatory hurdles are one aspect, but it's really the adoption hurdles that very often are the things that really make or break the value creation, and that the team needs to be growing and looking at how they're pushing that forward.
Great. And Marcia?
Hello, everyone. I'm Marcia Dawood. I've been an angel investor for about 10 years now in several different groups. I've moved all over the country for the last 10 years due to my husband's job, and ended up in Pittsburgh with the Blue Tree Allied Angels, in New York with Golden Seeds, with Laura's group, as she explained, with a couple of other groups in Dallas and in San Francisco. And ended up that I was put on the board of the Angel Capital Association as a board member about 5 years ago, and then became the vice chair this year, and I will become the chair next year. Part of my initiatives is really focused, like Laura said, on helping women founders to get funding. I started a group within the Angel Capital Association called Growing Women's Capital, where groups get together every month and we highlight entrepreneurs. We've been doing it on Zoom longer than COVID, and been able to get people like Golden Seeds always participates, and several other groups around the country that are interested in funding female entrepreneurs. So that's really been a huge initiative. I would say probably half of my portfolio, I think between funds and direct investments, I have about 100 companies in my personal portfolio. And I'd say probably at least 40% of that is healthcare, either mostly health tech. So, very passionate about the healthcare space, and have invested through a couple of different groups and also through a couple of different funds in healthcare. So always like to be, this is probably my 4th or 5th time on a panel at a RESI conference. So I always love to come to these and meet the entrepreneurs and hear what's going on.
Great, great. So that's sort of everybody's background. I thought it would be useful to get comments from everyone on how you see the investing landscape changing or having changed since March and since COVID came in. I mean, we all have had processes whereby deals would find us or we would find deals. People had patterns of behavior, whether it was an angel group with a big screening team or family offices that were networking around. Clearly, a lot of that changed in March. I will tell you that the running an angel group as a practice changed quite substantially from being a very in-person focused social function along with all the investing to a much more distant arm's length Zoom based function. But why don't we start take off, and why don't we go in reverse order? Marcia, you have a more of a global perspective, I think, and why don't you take a shot at it first?
Sure. So what we found is there were companies that have done very well since March, and other companies that did not, based on whatever the circumstances were. It could have been their product, their service, where they were in their fundraising cycle. I would say that I'm going to give you an example, though. It's actually a health tech company that did very, very well, and what they did. Really within, I would say, probably 5 or 6 days of the announcement of the sheltering in place, which started in San Francisco, which happened to be where I was living at the time. This company went and just did a total look over of their company. They went and cut costs. They decreased their burn. They changed. They were a B2B mainly company, but they had this vision and had a little bit of a B2C play, and they pivoted very quickly. But the thing that was most interesting about what they did was they knew they were going to run out of money at a certain time, pandemic or no pandemic. But with COVID coming, that was going to be very scary for them to try to raise money in that type of an environment. So immediately they went into fundraising mode, and within 2 to 3 weeks, they had all of their investors gathered so that they could tell the story about what they were doing in hopes that they would be able to raise some more money. And they were able to raise $1 million in about 6 weeks, from the middle of March to the end of April. So, there's stories like that where people were right on top of it. And I think that was probably one of the bigger lessons for me is you can't wait. It's not a wait and see type of thing. When something's happening, whether it could be anything, it could be a pandemic, it could be that your business personally is having, some kind of a problem, you're having a shipping order, whatever it is, you can't just wait and see. It is really about the team. I think it was Ron who mentioned that teams are so important, that when we do look at investments, and how can the team make sure that you're able to react and take the steps that you need to when something is happening that is so catastrophic.
Right. Who else has thoughts on this? Naram.
So also being global, being Israeli and American, and a Canadian Israeli partner. One of the things that we've seen is that this pandemic has really made the world much smaller. That with groups meeting virtually, you can pitch from anywhere to anywhere and not have to worry about a train or a plane and getting there. And it's made it important for leaders to know how to show up and know how to radiate a presence via the internet tools, and not phone it in. And I would agree with what Marcia said, that it's really about skating to where the puck will be, not to where it is now. I mean, we see a flood of companies coming forward that have COVID cures. Well, that ship has sailed, and they've got to be looking at beyond the COVID environment. What is their solution going to do? And so it really is the companies that we're seeing that have done really well have thought that through, have thought about what's disruptive, and are really doing some exciting things about moving into a new environment.
Yeah. Laura?
So, as a national organization, I agree that our organization has changed completely, because now, instead of having, we always operated somewhat virtually, but we always had in-person pitches through our pipelines. And now that it's national, not only we can bring in expertise, and it's just so much easier for us to gather critical mass around a deal when it's on Zoom. And we've also created several national committees that have been incredibly successful, both to help we had one that was helping our portfolio CEOs through this and helping them navigate the loan situation and all of these things. And we had, a COVID response team that I was on to try and sort through all these companies that you mentioned that were coming at us. And interestingly, I don't think we have invested in a single one of those, simply because it's just so difficult to understand that landscape. The other thing that I think has been really interesting is that so many things have been fast tracked, digital health, telehealth, and all sorts of things. And it's helped us, I think it will help us understand a lot better what's going to stick and what isn't, because telehealth already, there's some parts of it that haven't been that sticky. So I think it's been a very interesting little microcosm of what's really going to work in the future.
Right. Right. Ron, any thoughts?
Yeah. Obviously, we've seen a lot of changes in terms of how we interact with candidates. Just for us, early on, we just took a few weeks and just did triage on our existing portfolio, as an example. And then what we did was we shifted to look at our deal flow, and then slowly opened up our discussions once again with things that were in the pipeline. And we basically slowed everything down to make sure we understood exactly where sectors were heading and what adjustments were required. So from an early stage investing perspective, which I think most of the people here are interested in understanding, I think the current situation highlights the importance of being very selective in terms of who your investors are, because if this is your baby, and you want to make sure that if you have a concern, you have people available that can address your funding requirements or going to market requirements in this change. So I think this shakeup really highlights the importance of relationship building over a long period of time. So it's an unfortunate scenario where we are today, but I think it begins to highlight the really key things that entrepreneurs need to look for in investors. Nowadays, we're back to our usual selves. We're able to look at early stage investments like we did before, but we really pay attention now to how investors, how entrepreneurs are shifting their business plans to accommodate uncertainty in the near future. We see changes in pitch decks, for example, where they're looking at new markets. And these are the types of adjustments, I think, that many other investors are also looking for.
Okay.
Can I share an example of one of those?
Sure.
I mean, if we played the who do you know geography, I think, Laura, we have a, oh, sorry.
You cut out on us again, Ron, sorry.
Okay, maybe I have an unstable internet plan here. But I think the challenges that we're facing right now are really giving us an opportunity to highlight the really key things that need to be in an investor-entrepreneur relationship, including the need to communicate more efficiently nowadays, and the need to adjust to different market conditions.
Right. Good. Maram, you were on.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Laura, we probably have a couple of portfolio companies in common, but one that I'm thinking of that I know came to Golden Seeds and originated at Keiretsu, they're out of Israel, and in the current environment, I mean, you can't get on a plane and fly places. And so they took a look at their plan. They recruited some new people in their team. They came up with some creative ways of recruiting new executives with equity to conserve the cash burn. And they came back to the investors, like Ron has said, communicating proactively what the plan is, what they've adjusted, how they're moving things forward, how they're taking advantage of the shutdown to do better at connecting with surgeons who could be adopters of their women's health solution, and came back not just holding their hand out and requesting more money, but with a really proactive plan of what they're going to do to move this forward and how they're adapting. And it made it much more compelling coming forward and asking us to fund that growth in through this environment. I think, Ron, that's an example of what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think, we've seen on our side that the companies that figured out that the world was going electronic and that all of their relationships with their investors were going to be Zoom or WebEx based for the foreseeable future, and figured out how to adjust their communication style and figured out how to reach out to, in our case, angel groups, right? But I think family offices are the same, and understand how to access their processes electronically, and understand that the whole due diligence process was now not going to be face to face, but it was going to be these exchange of documents using cloud sourced file systems and things. There were a number of companies that have come to us that have figured that out pretty quickly and have been able to move through the process. The other thing is that on the investor side, there are angel groups and family offices who have established processes, who have figured out how to make those processes work better, and there are those who have not. And it is very interesting to see, for example, that when applications come in, I mean, we have a very automated process. For example, when applications come in, our screening committees have adapted. We've started taking applications from wider places, but we're also finding that some of our traditional syndication partners have not been particularly effective at coming up to speed on how to do due diligence and participate in due diligence or syndications, whereas others have. And I think that's something that entrepreneurs need to think through a little. As to Ron's point, is you got to really know who your investors are going to be, because on the investor side, there has been almost as much confusion in terms of how do the processes have to work as there has been on the entrepreneurial side with some of their basic business models, and also how they approach investors. So, at the end of the day, all the same money's out there, and people are figuring out how to get there. It went radio silent for about a month and a half. But since that time, I mean, we've finished 3 or 4 rounds for companies, and we've syndicated them in New England amongst different groups and VCs. And people are getting there, but people have had to change how they communicate. I thought our next question set, and we've sort of teed into it, was and this is for the entrepreneurs who are on the call, what's the best way to approach and get into the queue with your group or your family office? How's it changed a little bit, but also, what are the people who do it well doing? And I think sort of some stories there will be very helpful to our audience. Laura, you run a big shop. Why don't you take this one first?
So I'll just talk about one aspect of our group that I think I'm sort of the most proud of and I enjoy the most, and that is office hours. And these are run by every national chapter, even the small ones. And basically, they are free. You don't need a warm introduction. You sign up on the website. We give a 1-hour presentation to help sort of beginning entrepreneurs understand the landscape. And then we have one-on-ones with a Golden Seed member for half an hour, and also legal. And so in a single set of meetings, we can really meet young entrepreneurs that we might not have known about. We can have, a half-hour conversation one-on-one is a really profound way of getting to know people. It's not considered part of our deal flow, but at the same time, if we meet someone that we just really like, especially if they're young and new, it can set up a very long-term mentoring relationship and eventually send them into our pipeline. So I think the and this is something we might want to talk about a little bit later, the sort of parallel to COVID, the idea of access to capital for traditionally underrepresented groups has really, really come to the fore in the last few months. And I know Golden Seeds has been thinking about this very deeply. And I think getting into pipelines is one huge issue in terms of access, and something that I think we all need to sort of think about carefully.
If I could add to that, I think it's important too for the entrepreneur to find a champion within a group, especially if it's a big group like Golden Seeds, or find out who in the family office or fund is the true decision maker, so that you can be talking to the right people, not necessarily wasting time. I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs who get very frustrated because they think, well, I just spent all that time, pitching and talking to these people, and I answered all these questions. They sent me tons and tons of questions to answer, and I answered all the questions, and they still came back and said no. Well, it's like an art, a little bit, fundraising and a science, but finding that person who's going to really help you and kind of give you the insights about what's going on within the group or within the fund, I think can be really helpful.
Yeah, we have and it's a little bit snarky, but we actually have a soft policy at Cherrystone, which is that if an entrepreneur is not smart enough to find us, we don't want to invest in him or her, right? And look, the angel world is out there. The big angel groups are all over the country. They're very easily identifiable. You can get, most of them have big websites at this point in time, and it does require some digging around and web time. But once you do it, it's incumbent on the entrepreneurs to reach out. The angel groups are always looking for deals, right? And a lot of the bigger established ones have very clear screening entry points where you can put applications in, and they have screening committees that regularly review stuff. And, we have a monthly process that's highly defined, where screening committees at a certain point in the month, and then people review, and then it goes to a main meeting, and then it gets into due diligence processes. And it very much behooves entrepreneurs to learn how that works with the different groups. It's not identical across, and some of them have features like Laura described with the office hours things. There's different ways, and you have to do your homework to get up the curve on them.
Yeah,
Jerome, do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, you guys are really smart. I mean, we have a phrase as business psychologists, we say everything is diagnostic. And, if ultimately your value creation for your investors is in how you build a relationship and get a deal done with a strategic, how you build relationships and get deals done with PIs and key opinion leaders. And if you can't figure that out, or let me put it on the positive, if you can figure that out and demonstrate that really well with an investment group, that's a great diagnostic that shows us and earns us confidence that you'll be able to do that with the other groups that you need to interact with as well. And so if Marcia, if you and Rob and Laura, if you're looking for that, you're doing a great diagnostic of who are the people that are going to be able to drive adoption and create value for you.
If I can interject, one of the really nice things that we like to look at is our organized videos. RESI, we spoke earlier, has a really nice landing page for some of the companies that are attending RESI. So on our side, it's very easy for us now to understand what the value proposition might be before we click the yes, I'm going to meet with you button. So in terms of the mechanics of how to get in front of us and get our attention, attending conferences, well-organized conferences like this is, I think, a really good thing to do for early-stage entrepreneurs, and having the information organized on a good website, so it's easy to navigate and really get the value proposition out there. It's not buried in some page on your website. That's also really important. But I also think it's important to highlight what saying no from an investor means today as opposed to what it meant before COVID. Because a lot of investors are saying that I know are saying no to projects right now simply because they want to wait it out a little bit. Okay, there's uncertainty from a risk management perspective on their side. So for us, I'm willing to wait 3 months or 6 months if I feel uncomfortable about my risk management with a project. Okay, the entrepreneurs don't like to hear that, but that's the truth, because I don't know what the market is going to look like either. Everything is in flux nowadays, and we need to be very careful in terms of the directions that we're going. There are also other opportunities out there outside the life sciences sector that might be more attractive to us. So some of the resources that we usually apply to the life sciences have been shifted to other types of industry sectors. So those resources are eventually, hopefully, are going to come back. So there's a shift in terms of our normal dynamics internally for at least our organization. And thirdly, I think it's important to say that we understand that some projects that we really like are just going to go belly up. And we're not going to invest in something that we think is going to go belly up. But we might invest as an acqui-hire opportunity for us. So sometimes we would say yes, with an understanding that we're actually acquiring talent that we can apply to other types of projects, not necessarily the core product that you guys or service that project is offering. So there is actually an opportunity out there for people to actually exit or get funding, at least on a temporary basis. So these are the new world dynamics that I'm hoping that entrepreneurs will recognize. And you know, I don't know what you guys are doing out there on the angel space, but this is kind of what we're doing internally here.
Well, I will tell you one thing, which is that if you're an entrepreneur and you're getting ready to make pitches to different groups, whether they're angel groups or family offices or VCs, you absolutely have to be ready to answer the question, what has COVID shifted in your business model? Right? Because that is every single company. With our existing portfolio companies, we've like everybody else, we've gone back and done retrofit reviews and tried to understand how it's changed what they're doing. And for those that haven't been able to attend in the offices, they've had to change how their entire business operating structure. In some cases, particularly laboratory-based businesses, it's really been pretty challenging for some of them, and it's stretched out timeframes. It's changed their burn rates and their cash flows, and there's been some pretty serious stuff there. And for new companies coming in, I agree with what Ron says. We have actually shifted some of our focus more toward hard tech, away from health sciences, simply because the business models are a little bit more transparent at the moment, and some of the problems that the technologies are solving are not affected very much. But you know, on the flip side, we have to turn around, and when we have to syndicate deals, we have to. There are some angel groups, and a lot of family offices are just doing what Ron says. They're being more patient, and that sort of affects whether we think we want to take on a lead role in a syndication if we're not certain that we're going to be able to go out and find the rest of the capital to get the round completed. And there's money out there. I mean, with the stock market hitting all-time highs, believe me, there is money available out there. There is no question about it. I don't think anybody has said that they feel constrained on the capital side. What they are constrained on is that, you know, when investors get uncertain, they keep their hands in their pockets. And that's, yeah, you got to, as an entrepreneur, you got to figure out a way to get over that hump. Let's see. We have about 10 more minutes before we want to break out for questions. Why don't we take a shot at just go around a little bit and say this is a healthcare-based conference. What healthcare areas we see as being more active at the moment, where we're seeing interesting deal flows and structures, and what we're seeing entrepreneurs saying in the healthcare area that we're finding interesting at the moment. Maram, I know you're heavily involved in this area. You want to take a shot?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that that there's what we've seen one area, more active than another. I think there are things that have accelerated, like telehealth kind of solutions and new models of delivering healthcare. And I can't say that it's COVID specifically, but it's accelerated the adoption curve for that. And so it's an area that we're seeing more interest in. But I really think that it's pushing being more selective about deals in some of the more fundamental areas that we're all in. And I just want to underscore something Ron said. I mean, working with Keiretsu Forum, they have invested heavily in technology platforms and interfaces and other kinds of things to move deal flow forward. And you kind of see entrepreneurs that they have the cut and paste function down, and they know how to post their information and take advantage of that. And you see others that just kind of get annoyed and view that as a barrier. And I just think that this whole environment has made us more selective about looking at those things and really wanting to talk with the people that are taking the extra time to be user friendly to deal with.
Other thoughts on this topic?
So when looking at healthcare companies, I'll give you two examples, and most of it is around commercialization. There was a company we were invested in a couple years ago, and all of the diligence lined up that this company was going to do great once they got their FDA clearance. It was a 510K. Everything looked great. And it came down to the actual commercialization of the product, and it was a disaster, and the company went out of business. And then I'll give you a second example, in the bad and the good. The other example was a company I saw during COVID, but in the process of getting to the point where they could get to commercialization, they managed to get a contract from a big company who actually invested and gave them the pre-orders for X number of widgets, whatever they were making, in order to prove that the commercialization was going to be there. So taking that step of going out and finding the customer prior to the 510K clearance can be a huge piece in order to get that bridge funding that you need. Because sometimes you'll see a company that'll get pretty far and they know that 510K clearance is coming really soon. But that time period is so critical, because if they're trying to raise a bridge round and it doesn't really look like that bridge to the Series B, which is usually the case, is going to happen, you've got some issues there. So, figuring out ahead of time how you might be able to get some commitments before you get to the point of getting to the commercialization, I think could be huge.
Yeah, we've seen, and this has been an evolution that's happened over the last 7 or 8 years, but all of the potential exit players, the business, the pharmas, the bigger device companies, have, to use Ron's phrase, gotten very much more patient. It used to be that if you had a really good idea, you could get in and you might get a strategic VC to come in, the VC arm of one of these companies. And they want to see cash flowing positive sales in place with a upward trajectory before they'll commit to BD discussions on the other side. And for entrepreneurs who are in the earlier stages of getting these companies up, whether it's a 510K approach or it's a 505B2 or they've got a straight therapeutic that's going through into the IND route, entrepreneurs should give some very, very careful thought to how they're putting their capital plan and their capital stack together. Because the old days of being able to go out and assume that you get an IND, you're going to have somebody come in and give you a lot of money or put a big strategic investment in you, or just because you get a 510K and start getting out there, that's really not enough these days. And you have to plan to, with your capital side, to be able to take the company in pretty reasonably into a commercialization vector before you can have a reasonable expectation that you're going to have positive BD discussions. That's not a rule, but we are seeing a lot more of that. Meryl?
Laura, you had your hand up. So
okay, that's all right.
Just following on that, I think we've done a number of bridge rounds for companies that got 510K clearance but didn't realize that market adoption is an entirely different thing and requires, you know, publication grade clinical trials, and they're really two totally different things, and that capital needs are obviously very different. So that's one thing. Just really quickly to add on to some of what Marcia was saying in terms of commercialization, the things that we see most often that get in people's way, in addition to that, are not understanding who's paying versus who's using and who's experiencing the value proposition. That's really, really important. Also, not understanding hospital acquisitions and bundling. So, you know, whatever it is you're better than, who's selling it now, and are they also selling, you know, 15 other things bundled with that thing, and you're just never going to get in if that's the way things are going on. And workflow. So if what you're making does not fit into the existing workflow, my understanding is you're just really never going to get your foot in the door unless it's something just really transformative. So
that's particularly relevant in the device world.
Sorry, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, diagnostics.
Yeah, I mean, these surgeons or docs, they train on one particular piece of equipment. They get good at it. Their job is to churn as many of those procedures as they can. And if you want to put something in which, you know, you say to the hospital, it's cost a whole bunch less and it's this, but it changes the whole procedure. It's not clear that the docs are going to have a huge incentive to make that switch over.
I think it's also true in digital health, though. I think that's another place where that fitting into the workflow and information flow is crucially important. So,
I think it's true overall. I mean, we've seen that with diagnostics, that, you know, you ask some questions like, how is this going to be used? Where does it fit in the treatment flow, in the workflow? And you see goat eyes of not having thought that through. And it's a red flag for adoption. The same, I mean, just this morning, I saw a therapeutic, and it's moving from an oral medication to an intravenous. And it's, okay, how is this going to be administered? And what does that mean in the clinical treatment plan? And they weren't prepared to answer that, and those become adoption hurdles. And I think, you know, Rob, to your point about what strategics are looking for, they're looking for a franchise, not just a product. They're looking for a following. They're looking for a network effect. They're looking for, like Laura said, the publications that they can turn around and put in their marketing. And the more of that they've got to build themselves, the lower the exit price is going to be, or the more they're just going to wait and see how that unfolds.
Yeah. Right now, quite frankly, I see a lot of customers just hunkering down for the rest of 2020. They just want to ride out the year, you know, finish their bottle of scotch. 2021 is right around the corner. We have an election coming. You know, we have God knows what else 2020 can throw at us nowadays. So everybody's just hunkered down and avoiding frustration for early stage startups and maybe a little later stage startups. Just expect everything to be delayed. Hopefully things will open up in January, but we are very pessimistic on anything changing over the next 6 months at least. And we told our portfolio guys that just hunker down for maybe 12, 18 months, be realistic about this, you know. If you're an early stage startup and you're trying to tell me that you're going to go to doctor's offices nowadays and get them to use a new treatment or anything like that. My answer is, have you been to the doctor's office lately? Have you tried getting an appointment with a doctor lately? Things have changed drastically. And it might be better for early stage startups with low overhead just to ride it out. You know, don't take unnecessary risk right now. If I take a chance with you today, I'm not going to give you the same terms I might have given you a year ago. Okay, it's going to be much more friendly towards me because my risk is now much higher than it was a year ago. So my advice to early stage, especially first time entrepreneurs, you have the advantage of not having a high overhead, and you can ride this out a lot easier than somebody who has 10, 20 employees already, and they're really freaking out. So kind of put that into your thinking, and maybe that'll help you with some of the frustration that you have right now.
But Ron, what if you ask that question about have you been to a doctor's office and so forth, and someone comes back and they have some really compelling answers and they show you that they really have and they really do understand what's different and they're equipped not just to write it out, but they really do have some evidence that shows you they can move forward. I mean, I would think those would be the companies that you would want to take a closer look at. Am I wrong about that?
If you're able to get into a doctor today, given the fact that many are not taking any new patients and they're just kind of hunkered down, I really want to talk to you because you're doing something that is unusual. But I would say 90% of the things that we look at rely on old school thinking in terms of how the market behaves, both in terms of access to decision makers on the client side, but also from a supply side. If you're going to build me a product and you're going to tell me that you can do it in 8 weeks, we have manufacturing. I can tell you everything is delayed on the logistics side. You know, the supply chain is really hurting nowadays, and it's unrealistic to build something to have something available in a time frame that you thought you could have make it. So both in terms of your ability to grow your business and from a logistics side and your ability to go out to market, everything is delayed. So adjust your expectations accordingly.
That's yeah. I mean, a general sense of caution and a sense of realism on the part of the entrepreneurs, I think, is the message here. I want to move to questions. We have one which I will read out. This is from Bradley Everson. It says, our company is a game-changing liver diagnostics company and has done 3 rounds of financing with first angels and then family offices connected to our financial partner. We are approaching hitting an endpoint in a pivotal study for a market approval. We'd like to recruit more family offices that invest in life sciences to get us to a VC round after this milestone. Let's see. Would this be an appealing investment for a family office? So what kind of offices should my company look for? Ron, why don't you take the first crack at this because you're a family office.
Look, the way that we would approach anything, any claim, is to do really heavy duty due diligence on it. I would take a look at the pitch and see if it aligns with our investment strategy. We have some thoughts about different types of strategies that we haven't really put on our website, and maybe it aligns with one of those. But in terms of our due diligence, we do not do virtual due diligence. Okay, we need a face-to-face, and if we can arrange something like that, that's great. But send me an email.
Yeah,
that's what I would say.
I mean, I have to say that from the angel point of view, it sounds like you're pretty late stage for angel money. And if you're getting into late stage trials, you're probably in dollar terms way, way over where the angel world would be comfortable living, or in fact, even participating, because at that point, you're just sort of a passive go along. So I think you're definitely up in family office land and or VC land. And my impression would be that those are tailored pitches to players who know what they're looking at. It's unlikely that you're going to get generalists. If you have a very specific application, it's unlikely you're going to get somebody who's just going to make a general investment in that. So I'd really identify who the VCs and the family offices are who have expertise in that area and go after them on that approach. Let's see, we have one in the Q&A. No, I think that was the question. Okay. I don't see any more questions teed up here. Is there anybody else in the audience who has a question? You can type in. We can pause that. I think we have about 6 or 7 minutes left. Are there any final comments concerning dealing with family offices or angels? In particular, the process, one thing I want to mention is that, and I think it was touched on earlier, in dealing with the angel world, it's pretty important to understand that when you go into a transaction, you're going to be looking at a syndicated financing process. Very few angel groups will take a whole deal, right? You're going to have to cobble together groups of either, as a rule, multiple angel groups. If a typical round, $1.5 million round, something like that, you're probably going to be talking to at least 2 or 3 angel groups, probably 4, and then a collection of individual angels. And I think it behooves entrepreneurs to do some homework on how deals are being syndicated today. There's movement in the ACA to try and build a national platform. It's a complex issue because you have to address the needs of groups versus the needs of individuals differently. But I think it's an important understanding. Whereas, and I want to contrast that with the family office world, where if you go with one family offices often work in groups, sort of private groups, and they have people that they can make phone calls to get deals completed. It's as important in the family office side to understand how those networks work. VCs are also herd animals, okay? And once you get into a certain class of VCs, they can syndicate deals amongst themselves very, very quickly. They like to invest as clubs. And I think I'd like just like the entrepreneurs to be aware that that's really a very meaningful characteristic of each of the angel, the family office, and the VC world. They do interact, but by and large, they tend to go more laterally than they do angels up to VCs or the family offices and the angels often operate in much the same way, but there's a size differential in the way they'll come into deals. So I don't know if anybody has any other comments on that or feels that they see other perspectives there.
If I can just respond to you on the deal size issue. I'm not sure, I see all sorts of sizes in terms of our deals, but what we need now is more on the expertise side, since we cannot travel to Europe nowadays, okay? If there's a deal in Europe, I want somebody locally who knows that specific sector that I can trust, okay? Or maybe I want to travel to San Francisco. Very hard to do nowadays. So now we're relying on our existing network to help us much more than we used to before. So in some cases, that help happened to be angels. So I would say that there's an opportunity now to have a hybrid model where you have both angels and family offices working together to better understand the deal and make a decision much more efficiently. So I really don't see that dichotomy between between family offices and angel groups, because we're working with a hell of a lot of angels in San Francisco. Okay,
Good.
maybe they shouldn't be called angels. Maybe they're family offices. Maybe everything has been shifted. But so it's about the network. And one thing that I don't know if people know is that we do out of professional courtesy, we support other organizations, hedge funds, other family offices, also certainly high net worth individuals in terms of their decision making, because we have internal capabilities that they may not have, for example, with respect to data analytics. So there's always this communication back and forth between the angel world and the family office world. And I don't really see a difference between the two.
Ron, and I think the challenge of that is for an entrepreneur, if you're thinking transactionally about raising capital, is this the right angel group? How large are the checks they write? Period, done, finished, end. I think you're going to be at a disadvantage. And I think that you've really got to be thinking about building network, building relationship. Who's going to validate what you're working on, and what's the worth of that validation? Who has the web of relationships? And it really is about just echoing what you said. It really puts the onus on the entrepreneur to be thinking more and more about building networks.
Yep.
So there's actually a question that's sort of relevant to this, that about finding an appropriate angel group or family office and what they're focused on. And I think all angel groups, I assume in many VCs, they have a pretty well-honed website that you can find out exactly what they focus on. And what I find is that sometimes it's not that people didn't read that, it's that somehow they didn't believe it, or they thought that even so what they're doing might be interesting. So I would, go to the website, find out what these angel groups and VCs invest in, and believe that. And just don't try if you're not up their alley. I was going to say something else, but I forgot.
Well, I just to add on to your point, Laura, there are a lot of angel groups out there which are truly very much not sector focused. They're all about investing as a group and getting good deals into their process. They do build expertise over time, and the best way to look at that is to go on their website and see what they have invested in. Yeah. Right? And if you see 60 or 70% healthcare companies, you're going to be dealing with people when you go in to take a look. I don't think it would be unusual, in my opinion, to find a group that was specialized down to a particular disease level or something else. In that case, you're looking more at specialist VC funds or other elements of the structured capital world. The angel world tends to be a little bit more deal agnostic. There's some that have healthcare, but some have sector focuses. Some are like, Golden Seeds are looking at promoting women and entrepreneurs, but are willing to look at deal flow across a broad range of areas.
Yep. However, so the other thing that I think it's important, because glioblastoma was mentioned in this question, is I think you have to look not only at what you want to raise right now, but what you're going to need to raise down the line. And that really affects whether you're appropriate, at least for angels. If you're going to need to raise $1 billion for a therapeutic, I think it's just unlikely that you're going to be seen as appropriate nowadays for angels. So that has to go into your companies as well.
We are at 11 o'clock, which I think is our witching hour. I'd like to thank everybody on the panel for your participation. I think some great comments today. It's a little strange that we don't get to see the audience. We usually do. We're usually in a nice big conference room up in Boston for this, but to all of the attendees, I want to thank you for having listened. And I guess you can reach out to panelist members if you have more specific questions.